Now, let's be honest, that last video was not my best of work, to say the very least. And whilst there's a lot of panic, as always, I don't necessarily think this is as bad as people are making it out to be. And of course, in areas like this, it's very important to stay calm and composed because whilst everyone says it's a bear market, there's a few things here that are very interesting to me, and more so the fact that we're still trading at a $60,000 Bitcoin. And at this point, of course, adapting to where we can go lower, which we of course can at this moment in time. There's a few things we're going to be covering in this video regarding that. But interestingly here, we have essentially seen, in my opinion, what is just a very, very large correction in still an overall very bullish cycle. And there's many factors that go into that I'm going to show you in this video. But to declare it a bear market immediately, I don't think is necessarily the case. And if it is the case that we are in a bear market, we would, number one, very likely get some form of retracement first before things likely worsen significantly. But more importantly, where altcoins are positioned at this moment in time is equally as important because we've seen a lot of these altcoins go back to extreme lows. And I'm going to show you my positioning on some coins as well to show you why, in my opinion, I'm not necessarily viewing this as a bearish market or a bear market in particular, but more so an extreme correction within an overall bullish market. Now, the coins and altcoins that I'm buying are at all-time lows and have been for quite some time. And from the liquidation event, most of those have just come in to fill those wicks now. So I want to give you a bit of perspective on my view of the market from an altcoin basis, which is really my biggest focus here. Now, there's several factors to also consider from the basis of what has happened with Bitcoin right now. Bitcoin has now fallen 50% plus from 125 to 60K. Of course, what we need to look at is how much worse can it plausibly get here? From a $60,000 Bitcoin, the total market cap is currently within an incredibly strong structure. And there was a segment in the last video, and I'm not going to say that I called it because quite frankly I didn't, but I threw this out. And that was the idea that if something is to get extremely worse at this moment in time, we want to be looking down towards around $1.3 trillion. If we go over to the total market cap, again, obviously if there's a very big drop, you want to be watching for that bearish trendline rejection, which would flush that low and bring us to 2.3 trillion. Major flush to the downside would be there. Now, the reason I do these things is so you can understand that in the event I'm wrong about a turning point from where the market's going to reverse from, that's where we need to look if we do not reverse from where I'm looking from. And this is done intentionally to help you understand that if we do go lower, try not to switch bias and be like, oh my God, we're going down, the market's over, it's dead. That's not the case. But instead, what I like to do is have reference points areas to be like, okay, we haven't reversed from here, but we can then reverse from there. We can then reverse from there. I create checkpoint systems, and basically it's to go, right, I was wrong about reversals from this region. I was wrong about this happening. However, this is where we need to look if this happens without losing the bias. Most crypto traders have a very limited viewpoint of the market, and it's kind of that psychological discussion we talk about where it's like, right, if this is broken, that's next, that's next, that's next. But I'm going to show you a few things here that will probably get you very, very excited. And in fact, you probably should be excited at this point. More so because of the extreme deviation to the downside that we have now seen. Of course, at this point, on-chain metrics, which I'm going to show you, are significantly flagging up to cycle bottom territories. Extreme cycle bottom territories. Yet this is happening at a total market cap above $2 trillion still. This is happening with BTC at $60,000. So at this moment in time, I think there's probably going to be another drop at some point, which would, at this moment, even if we see a recovery, probably be a bottom marking situation. How we get there is open to interpretation, and we'll break that down in this video as well. But what I'm trying to get to here is, theoretically, we're seeing extreme cycle bottom indicators flagging when we're nowhere near the bottom of where this cycle started from. And this still leads me to believe that whilst theoretically the 4-year cycle theory is currently ringing true, we still need to be looking at altcoins here. Now, most are not going to believe in altcoins and didn't believe in altcoins previously to the drop we've just seen. But I think this is where your focus needs to significantly orient and increase towards altcoins more than ever. Because historically speaking, at this very moment in time, there are two major factors to consider. That is either at this moment, the market does get another drop down and we enter full-blown final capitulation. This would then theoretically mark the fastest bear market in history without going anywhere near previous cycle bottom lows. That could be one thing to consider, and would also still confirm the fact we are probably in a super cycle of a very big magnitude that is yet to be fulfilled. And what I mean by that is if we do get another sweep lower, specifically to 55k to 50k as a first initial basis just for this introduction, before we break it down further, this could essentially mark a bottom of what is theoretically a bear market and continue the cycle from there. But what can also happen at this moment in time, keeping a fixed view on altcoins, is knowing that no cycle ever truly ends unless altcoins begin to surge. And of course, that's where Ethereum, the biggest factor for me, comes into play here. Now, when you look at my position on the altcoins I'm buying, and you look at the altcoins I'm buying from the prices I'm buying at, I'm buying for a specific reason because they're at all-time lows. And despite the drop we've seen on Bitcoin, and my portfolio is obviously down right now, and I'm going to show you that as well because I never care about hiding anything like that. The bigger picture view here is crucial. And whilst most are losing faith at arguably the most important time, you must increase your confidence here with any physical decline lower at this point. So the immediate thing to do is look at where I was wrong. And the next thing to do is to adapt and understand why I still maintain the same view, specifically for altcoins. Now, what's also important to note in the previous video is the concept for me still remains the same of we were going to break 80k. And we've done that. We've just done it with a lot more aggression than I originally anticipated. And fortunately for members, I managed to get where we were going to go just before we actually got the break. However, publicly, I didn't have time to do a YouTube video, so it happened. Who cares? You're going to be wrong, you're going to be right. The truth is, when you get something right, no one says a word. When you get something wrong, people are quick to come out. And this is the reality of crypto that I don't really like, because people want you to be wrong and people want you to be afraid of being wrong. I could not give a fuck about being wrong because I know where I'm looking and I know what's going to happen. But people want you to be wrong, to ridicule you and attack you. And the first thing that happened when we actually broke towards 60k is a huge influx of comments coming to YouTube. Like, people legitimately sit there on their computer watching the charts, immediately think of me, go onto YouTube and leave comments. And this is what happened at all-time highs. When we went from 115 to 125k, as I started to say we are going to drop and we're going to see a big crash, the comments start to fill up and people go, we're going higher. Classic, getting bearish before the bullish breakout, the golden bull run. All of those people deleted their comments after. So do I care about being wrong? No. That's why I'm still doing videos, because you're going to be wrong and you will make mistakes and things will not go exactly as you expect. You don't control these markets. And it's my job to adapt to this and understand from a bigger picture basis how this may be developing into something more beautiful, and to figure out strategies to handle this in this area. More importantly, control your emotions. So let's break this all down right now. Now, the first thing we're going to do in this video is I'm actually going to show you my positioning and what I'm buying this cycle. Now, whether or not you believe this cycle is over, whether you believe we're in a bear market, I'm buying coins that are already in a bear market, a multi-year bear market. And right now, at this moment in time, this portfolio I'm showing you is down $250,000 since we started to buy more during the October crash. But as you can see, I'm not buying at very high prices. In fact, I'm consistently accumulating at this moment in time with every decline lower, and have been doing so pretty much since 2024, 2023, almost 2023. And I'm amassing positions here because whilst everyone's saying that we're in a bear market, what I'm looking at has been in a bear market since the 2020, 2021 cycle. And I believe they are significantly overdue, the second cycle, which is actually starting to bring us much closer to a COVID-style situation. And if not, like I'm going to show you on the charts, something far greater, a continuation of the existing cycle. So in terms of if this is a bear market, well, what I'm looking at is already in that territory. Therefore, the fact I'm down around 50-60% at the moment on buys that look like this on a few other coins as well, the reality is I'm down 60% at all-time low regions. Therefore, a lot of people are trying to attack and say, you know, I'm down 60% or you're down 60%. I'm wrecked. You're wrecked. No, that's not the case, because I'm an investor that's making investments and I'm investing for the long term. So where BTC goes doesn't necessarily mean much to me. But what does matter is that a 50% decline, if I was to compress this chart entirely, and we look at the bigger picture here, maybe I should have shown this so people can understand my perspective of what I'm doing here. Now, with this continuous accumulation that's taking place right now, you need to understand where that drawdown is taking place from. And this is something I call good drawdown versus bad drawdown. And we can actually see, funnily enough, what happened. And one of the biggest complexities for me was the liquidation event. It really fucked things up, quite frankly. Now, in the liquidation event, I actually bought there. But due to liquidity and whatever was going on, it triggered me up there, which is very annoying, to say the very least. But of course, I'm in an area here where I can easily exit the market in a profit. And as a matter of fact, even the original buy is basically at break even. And a singular move back up can immediately bring me into 100% profit on certain buys. But this is what most people forget. Now, when it comes to capturing the peak low of cycles or making what many people call life-changing money within the markets, that's only attainable by buying at these sort of prices and buying coins and altcoins specifically at these sort of prices. Because what you will historically see during times like this, and it's why my view of a bear market is quite skewed, because I'm buying very different assets this cycle and have done every other cycle for that matter. I'm not buying Bitcoin, I'm not buying Ethereum, because for me, the risk to reward is not as favorable as what is available on coins like this. So when we look at the drawdown that's occurred from this particular region, we must understand the bigger picture viewpoint that I have of the market overall, which is inevitably these coins will eventually revisit back up into these levels, or at least retrace some extent of their previous cycle. And that will be within the vicinity of 1,000 to 2,000%, which is why I've been playing this longer term game of simply accumulating with every decline lower. Now, of course, crypto is a very immature sector. People will immediately jump out and be like, you're wrecked. But I'm not wrecked, because I'm not selling, I'm not capitulating. I'm actually using this to build the strongest foundation possible with each decline. Because every decline lower, and this is why most people don't buy in these levels, is because it's very scary to buy at these prices. Because a singular drop to the downside can be 10s to 50% plus. And in that temporary window of holding, people cannot handle it emotionally, psychologically, and even in some cases physically. But of course, when you look at all of these charts and where they've been, for most people, they wished they would have bought at these prices. This is where people will tell you we'll never see those prices again. But this is where you do see those prices again. And when the market gives you that opportunity, I do not view drawdown in these areas as a negative. In fact, this is what investing is. For most people, they deem it very safe to buy when the market's rallying. But for me, every additional downside at this point is welcome, because anything lower, knowing zero is literally there, is really a no-brainer for me at this moment in time. And of course, looking at these altcoins, I think they are a very big telltale sign of where Bitcoin and the total market cap and everything else likely is. Because this is historically exactly what happened during 2020 and even during FTX in a very similar situation. Knowing that altcoins are at these prices, and knowing that most altcoins now, as I'll show you, are well within a capitulation phase, whilst BTC is not necessarily fully there yet, an additional sweep at this point to take out the lows one more time is only going to increase the prospects of what likely follows from here. And that is what I believe is inevitably going to be an alt season. So I've been in the positioning game for quite some time. Now, the difference is my drawdown is taking place from an area not only where it's easily recouped, but also can change into profit very quickly. Now, going back to the liquidation event, the biggest problemo for me at that moment in time was on many exchanges not crack 'em, which is what I'm showing you here. My targets at this moment in time and what we did with members was accumulate in these regions. The goal was to buy for a short-term profit and take profit here to reinvest back down at where we are now. However, during the liquidation event, which is very, very annoying, on many exchanges, we actually went straight down to my price points. So one of the toughest decisions I faced recently was during that liquidation event, and bearing in mind, this is where this was during the liquidation event, not BTC, etc. up there, but the coins I'm looking for went down to these lows where they are now trading legitimately. So on some exchanges, these had hit. So therefore, my targets and what I mapped out from ABC was perfectly fulfilled, but not on every exchange. Therefore, I had a choice to face where if that liquidation event was legitimate and was actually going to mark the bottom of these altcoins, and I didn't buy in that moment and the market absolutely surged higher for hundreds, if not thousands of percent, I would have been sat there missing the entire cycle. Therefore, my idea was to take the risk of buying, knowing that there's a very big risk of drawdown still, to simply just keep amassing and buying more. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. So I think this is good to show you instead of just showing you the charts. You need to see what I'm actually doing and why I view the market in this current way. Now, of course, a 60% drawdown here, which is the next important step. And I have no problem with showing you this or drawdown, because when the tide turns, I will be laughing and this will be 7 figures plus in profit. Of course, in these moments, people say, well, it's never going to turn. It's taking forever. When's it going to turn? Well, historically, it's never going to be a smooth journey, but that's what investing is all about. Nowhere here have I bought near any remote highs. In fact, there are no other buys besides pretty much predominant all-time low territory. And that's exactly what's going to be decreasingly coming through with every decline lower. Now, it's very different to holding drawdown up here. As an example, holding drawdown in this area is a very different story. However, here's a good example of what happened previously. And I didn't actually take profit for this particular pair, but I did on another pair. And I'm going to show you that now. When you buy at these prices, as we start to delve very, very close to where zero is, where most people will never be willing to pull the trigger because they're too scared. This is where I make most of my money in crypto when we reach these points. If we go to this particular price of 38 cents, when I first made this buy, that singular move was a 30% drop. And when you zoom out on the charts, this is important. You don't actually want to look at percentages in these regions to the downside, because it can be very scary and deter you from buying, especially when you've got echo chambers of worse and worse and worse. But if I was to place a horizontal line at zero and look at where the complete bottom is for this pair, from an actual candlestick size basis, it's nowhere really much worse it could get besides taking out that low and go into the depths of those regions. But of course, with a longer term view and zooming and compressing this chart, when the tide turns, as it always does with altcoins, if this is to reach, let's say, $5 to $6, would you look back in that moment in time and go, why the fuck didn't I buy? Or would you look back in that moment, if we're trading up here, and go, well, what horrible buys they are? It's only in the moment they can look bad to some people, or even look bad because the market as a whole has gone lower. But this is very similar to what happened during COVID. Now, to show you this example further, and why I'm very confident in where we are within the market, is because, of course, in this situation, my next buy was a 30% decline from this buy. But then this went down 53% over the course of several months. Now, of course, in that moment, when you're zoomed in and you're looking at that and you're contemplating your life choices and going, what am I doing? This is psychopathic. It's when all hope is lost that the highest buy there ended up reaching a profit of 250%. And that was only because of where I bought. And the second buy down below was up 400%. And when you zoom out and look at that, that's all taking place within an overall range from here to there. And this is only obtainable by buying at these prices within this area. So if we can go lower than here at this moment in time, then I am more than welcome to seeing that. Specifically, if BTC is now capable of breaking the $55,000 region, then you know we are getting incredibly close to something incredibly prosperous. Now, the same is applicable in where we are right now. So if we look at some of my highest buys from here, from that liquidation event, well, all we've now done is come in to fill those liquidation lows. So if we apply the same concept to my highest buy here at 55 cents on this particular coin, this buy is currently down 65%. And of course, in the present moment, you can look at this and be like, oh my God, it's down 65%. But the key is I'm continuously buying lower and lower and lower. Now, to explain this even further, and to show you a good visualization of this is really where the most money is made. And everything in crypto is a risk. Everything in crypto is a risk, irrespective of your beliefs, hopes, and desires. Therefore, if I'm going to take a risk within the market, that risk is going to be taken from the lowest prices I can possibly attain. And every lower price the market gives me is another opportunity to take that additional risk. Now, as an example, on the lowest recent buy over here, this is currently down 30 or 40% as a matter of fact. But if this reverses back, which it will, to this area here of where my highest buy is situated, that buy is immediately up 66%. Now, later down the line, when the market and the tide begins to turn, going back to that range high is 300%. If the market proceeds further, 1000% is there. This is exactly what XRP did in 2020, 2021. And I think that's exactly what is due to happen. Of course, this has taken much longer than anticipated, but I think it's very important you guys are seeing and understanding what I'm actually doing in the market. So you can see a very clear standpoint of where and why I'm doing certain things and see things in a certain way. So in the bigger picture basis, of course, I'm just accumulating with every chance I can plausibly get. And I'll also show you another coin for that matter as well. So one of the other coins I've been buying, very similar to the previous coin I just showed, there is also the original buy from there, which is no longer visible on this chart for some reason. A very similar concept occurred. Now in this moment in time, when I bought this coin here at around 10 to 11 cents, this achieved a very quick profit of 200%, where I took some of that profit off. Now, in that moment in time, this is where everyone thought the alt season was beginning, but I pulled the trigger. This extended another 200%. I didn't sell everything. Very quickly, we can see that buy quickly drop back down to a 50% plus discount, where I reinvested again. And this is where, prior to the October crash, the liquidation event, when I told you guys I thought the market was going to crash, this is why. Because I bought these altcoins here with the opportunity to make a quick short-term 100% plus. And we can see from here to there, we almost achieved that rather beautifully, with an 82% profit being sold twice, with the anticipation to buy from that October crash. Now, of course, the complexity was in that moment in time, the liquidation event brought this down on many exchanges to my original targets here right now. But again, I couldn't take that risk. I bought this here. Liquidation event got me in up there due to poor liquidity conditions. However, whilst that is also down 50%, you can again see the bigger picture viewpoint of what I'm trying to achieve this cycle. And it's not going to come from Bitcoin, and it's not going to come from anything else really, unless it looks like this. And the reality for me is seeing that many coins that have had their first cycle and have been in multi-year bear markets then had absolutely explosive second cycles, very similar to Zcash, which I got at $22 prior to the boom. It's an identical situation occurring for me at this moment in time. Therefore, what I'm actually doing here is tracking BTC's decline in symmetry with these altcoins. And now that we've got the push down on BTC, you can see again, when comparing an equivalent move on BTC or Ethereum or anything else, these are the drops that I'm experiencing right now. This is again what I call good drawdown, because here it doesn't bother me because I have no intention to sell. I only have one simple intention, which is to continuously buy more, the lower and lower we can go, if we are to even get lower at this point. This is where I become increasingly confident. So if you compare the move from the October liquidation event to the present day, that's the drawdown I'm currently witnessing. And if I show you this here right now, this is the portfolio I show publicly, one of many. This is down $257,000 right now as we speak. Yet that loss is coming, or drawdown, shall I say, because it's unrealized. I'm not going to sell. That's taking place from buys like this, from here to there. So what you now need to understand is, if this, with the other coins I'm showing, is a $250,000 drawdown, then what happens from here to there, to there, to there, to there, etc., 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 in multiples of $250,000. This is exactly what I did in COVID with XRP. And that is where this portfolio you see right now all originally stemmed from. Now, something else to look at here that is very interesting to note is, whilst these coins are at all-time lows and whilst we have seen this decline, this portfolio is still up 7 times from what I started with. Despite being in a multi-year bear market, this is still up 7x. And that's only come from taking profits and reinvesting at these prices. And of course, the multiples I'm looking to achieve on this when these begin to turn is going to be remarkable. And I'm obviously going to be showing this every step of the way. But of course, the immediate thing to be doing in this video is showing you this, because I have nothing to hide and I have nothing to be afraid of. As a matter of fact, I welcome anything lower at this point. So whilst I haven't been absolutely perfect on BTC, this is actually leading us just to where I originally anticipated in the first place for all of these coins. The buy, the sell, the reinvestment. I just had to take a risk during the liquidation event, but as we can see, that's brought me back down to where I wanted it to go in the first place. So, of course, in these circumstances, being emotional is not necessary for me because the bigger picture is, of course, very prosperous when the tide begins to turn. And and as these now trade in these very regions and we compare where they are, knowing there's plausibly not much room to go lower, this would tell us quite evidently if there is another break to the downside at this point to 55, 50K, etc. It's probably the complete bottom marking territory if this is not already it. But if you're going to look and pursue those big money making moves in crypto to capture the bottoms of cycles, especially alt season cycles, this is exactly what you must be doing. Even if you buy here now and this dropped down to there, you would be down 50%. If you're emotional and focusing on the present, you're probably going to capitulate and sell. But I'm willing to hold these and amass more because remember, the cheaper these go, the higher the upside percentage is simultaneously, and the less money you need to invest to make a huge amount of money. As a matter of fact, buying this here right now with even a mere 1K is 1,000% up there. You do the maths, and you can do this on the maths for everything else. So I will be showing this a lot more, but of course this is absolutely vital to show you before we proceed into the charts, because this is going to lead me into what I've been basically getting to this entire time, that an alt season must be very close, because the last time this happened, the alt season was immense. So as we now jump into the charts and begin to look at the monthly timeframes of absolutely everything, of course, you can hopefully see now with my positioning as the foundation of what I'm seeing, where we could very well be within this cycle overall. Now, I think people are going to, again, be very quick to judge and very quick to make the assumption that things are going to get significantly worse. And of course, now that we've got here, we have to naturally look lower and I have to adapt because we've exceeded somewhat of a threshold. I mean, some of these zones were on the charts. They're there for a reason because I'm fully well aware that we can go lower. But right now, looking at what I've just shown you on those coins, and looking at a few other coins I'm going to show you in a moment, but then more importantly, looking at the structure of BTC and the total market cap. Right now, because of the difference in the cycle, and we are now almost approaching where those ETFs got launched, you need to first of all go to a 12-month and a 6-month time frame on BTC and look at where we are right now. So when people are saying we're in a bear market, and we can go to the 12-month on total as well, I think people are making a very wild assumption in what is realistically something that shouldn't necessarily be feared right now, because we are nowhere near the lows of a bear market. And as a matter of fact, with where we're currently trading, BTC is actually more in the scopes of being in the realm of where we were in the equivalent of the FTX 2022 crash, without actually being anywhere near the previous cycle lows. Over here, the previous cycle lows were at 4K. We hit $15,500. That is our current cycle bottom. We are trading at $66,000 at this current moment in time. We're almost back at 67. And when you look at the 6-month time frame from here, again, I think things are going to proceed much further, but there's many variables to this that could obviously happen beforehand. Now, the key to understand with this is this cycle is either going to continue very, very soon, I would say, and continue much higher, or we are going to see what we have seen in previous cycles, where even if we are about to go in a bear market, there is very likely going to be a recovery of some sorts, no doubt, that will allow the altcoins to flourish. Because, of course, if you look at where the altcoins I'm buying are, and you look at a few others, as an example, handpicked a random few, Link is very popular, so we obviously want to look at something like Link as well because it's near those lows and it's taken out its liquidation low. CVX, this is something that the members mentioned on a live, which I think is a great example of another coin that is seemingly at the cusp of death near zero. And Zcash, which I bought myself at $22, and we can see that went to $700. Now, from 2022 until September 2025, this looked like it was dead. And I bought this when everyone was saying the same thing. It's dead. It's never going to happen. It's over, blah, blah, blah. The same thing that happens every time. Yet in the midst of that death, this proceeded significantly higher. Now, in the moment of holding this from around $22.5, this went down. In that window of time whilst I was holding, this went down around 60%, 63% in the window of me holding this. I kept holding and kept my conviction because I wasn't looking at the drawdown. I was looking at what could follow when this eventually rises higher. Now, when you look at something like Link and where it's situated at this moment in time, coming into a very long-term trend line, the core basis of most of these altcoins that haven't really had a significant rally is not that they're dead, it's just that their time has not yet come. And now that they have reached these lows, whilst BTC remains trading up in this region, it begins to bring back memories of what's happened in previous cycles. And the on-chain metrics prove this much further. Again, I probably should have seen this a bit more, but my idea in the previous video that I did throw out is that we will break this level. Didn't really see it go in this low, but you don't want to have a fixed view here. So I can happily say I was wrong about how low the break would go, but I don't see this really any different to the concept of breaking this level anyway. And the more aggressive it happens at this moment in time, the better it is going to be, because your orientation wants to be on altcoins right now. So the most important part is we are trading around the previous all-time high. You need to be waiting for the monthly closures and higher time frame closures here, because this is what happened before. And for the first time in history, we are seeing on-chain extreme deviation cycle bottom signals being achieved in undervalued territory when we are nowhere near the cycle bottom. So how can we be in a bear market when the low is there and the high is there, and we are in the 50 to 60% retracement territory of the overall cycle thus far? Furthermore, when we look at the total market cap entirely and look at where we're trading, well, we are exactly at the previous level. We've actually taken out the yearly low on BTC and the total market cap as well. And we are now coming into that major rejection, exactly like we saw during the FTX situation, which led the cycle higher. So it really raises the question at this point is, what is the next downside? How low could it go? Does it need to go much lower? And what would that initiate specifically for altcoins like this, which are mostly, for some, in their first cycle? Now, to show you the idea of the first cycle, we're going to go back to where this journey all started for me publicly, and that was XRP here. Now, you can see the coins I'm buying are identical to XRP, and I'm actually very, very, very confident that we are going to see some crazy shit start to happen soon because of what's just happened now. Now, if you look at XRP here in this previous cycle, this was the first cycle in 2017, and it done the exact same thing as most altcoins, most of which have only ever had one cycle. In fact, one example I've shown that I hold is Sand. Sand has had its first cycle, gone into a multi-year bear market, has had its swings up and down, and has finally gone in for the capitulation all-time low. Why? But this is near zero at this point. So unless, of course, Sand is going to die alongside most other altcoins, I would assume that these are in areas at this moment in time where the reward is significantly outweighing the risk. And if we go back to XRP in this moment in time, that is exactly where the same situation occurred during COVID. And I bought this exactly there. Now, if you compare this to where I'm buying some other coins and have been buying from that liquidation event, it's around the equivalent of here to the current low. And you can see if you had bought XRP around 28 cents in that region in time, you would also be down around 60%, and you would have been holding for months on end. But with a bigger picture focus and waiting for the second cycle to occur, and this is important, we are waiting, and what I've been waiting for in terms of an alt season is a second cycle on most altcoins to begin to take place. And of course, it's taken BTC and various other things to get all the way down to these levels to bring them into those lows. The liquidation event did it, but we have now discovered it was not a legitimate move, but we have now come in legitimately. That is a bonus for me, because this soon became 600% and later down the line 1,000% area, even buying there. If you had bought there it would have been 1,600, which is what I did in that cycle, fully documented to 3,000% if held. Now, if you look at what most people do here, is people don't buy in these areas because the market's crashing. And of course, historically speaking, you never, ever, ever want to get bearish when everyone else is getting bearish, because even if the market goes a tad lower at this point, it is much more likely there is a recovery coming, especially when you see Onchain even further, than there is that things are going to get significantly, significantly worse. Because for most coins, things are significantly, significantly worse already. And one of the reasons I believe the market was going to roll over in 2020 during COVID was not just because there was a FUD-driven black swan, but because XRP had done this. And that is often your initial indication that things can begin to turn very soon. So what's interesting about this is obviously we're seeing extreme cycle measurement points, but all we're doing right now is coming back in to the previous cycle all-time high. And in what is existingly at present a very different cycle and seemingly a super cycle, this is going to become a very important level for the market. Simultaneously, if we go over to the total market cap to build a complete picture here, the idea was, again, we could breach the low and sweep into the 2.3 area or so. That's what we covered. And what I covered in the previous video is the big risk, if I was wrong, was this trend line. What did the market do? It broke through and came into the trend line. It's broken through the bearish trend. Every other time blasted off. This time we didn't. But what have we done here? We've come back in and rejected the trend line. We've swept into this level. More importantly, this monthly closure is going to be vital for me, because not only are we in the previous all-time high area, but there is a similarity to COVID underway right now that I think is very important. And that is, of course, the breakout we have seen here from the previous all-time high. We have come in and broken this bearish trend, bearing in mind we need to look at the bigger picture here of the overall channel. And I still believe we're going to go to this area. Now, this may need some more downside at this point, but I think inevitably, whilst the drop here seems significant, I'm looking at things that look like XRP over here. And I think this is what you should be looking at too. Stuff like this. Because whilst BTC is trading here and Total is trading there, most altcoins are trading in these regions at these very lows. And that's exactly what this was doing once upon a time. In fact, if you look at Zcash prior to the breakout, it looks like most altcoins right now, trading dangerously around all-time lows. Now, you tell me, where was the best time to buy Zcash? It was here. Where did most buy? Once it's too late. And by the time I'm out of the market, most people jump in and they make a mere 76% on round trip. My goal is to hold these through thick and thin, because something is clearly brewing in the background here. Now, going back to this and comparing this to the next situation, even if the cycle is not to proceed, and I believe it will go to 5 to 6 trillion because of Ethereum, which is another topic of discussion to come through after. But the most important part here is what happened the last time this happened with the total market cap. And the last time we saw something of this magnitude where we broke the previous bear trend was here. We took out the low, we closed back up. Now, if we close back above this month, the only thing I would really be watching for is another sweep of this low with a possible extension down. If we see a sufficient closure this month, I would say there's a very high probability we're going to retrace at least to 3 trillion. There will be some assessments to be made there, but overall we can see right now, you cannot necessarily classify this as a bear market. More so an extreme correction in the present phase within an overall very bullish trend. And there is no reason to be very scared here. Now, if the cycle is to proceed, knowing where those altcoins are currently positioned, then of course, the most logical thing to look at is the complete swing continuation higher. Now, why that is completely plausible is because of Ethereum's underperformance in this cycle. And if we look at this situation that happened over here during April 2021, look at what the market did here. And there's various things it's comparable to. It's not just comparable to COVID, but also comparable to 2021, where we saw a big correction. If you look at the correction that occurred in 2021, the market dumped 55% total market cap. Right now, we've dumped around 51, 52. So of course, there's a bit of room here because of where we're trading. But that is not a bearish chart to me in any way, shape or form. Now, if you see what happened in this pullback over here, this is where almost both cycles are beginning to combine together. Ethereum in this moment in time dropped 60%. Yet XRP dropped 73%. What happened here? Ethereum went on to make new highs. The total market cap went on to make new highs. BTC went on to make new highs. XRP didn't, it topped. Ethereum, from this drop to that drop, which is around 60% there, has dropped once again 63%. Now, more importantly, look at where we're trading and look at the overall structure. Over here, Ethereum also dropped into March 2024 down to the April 2025 lows, 66%. No one called that a bear market. So why is this a bear market? Because over here, as you can see, looking at that window of time from March 2024 to April 2025, what is that on the charts over here? That was BTC there up to there, as you can see within this window. That was not a bear market, and in fact the cycle continued, but yet Ethereum went lower. Ethereum is now back in this very important area equally. Now, if you now understand what this could mean, it means various things. It means, number one, the prospects of a cycle continuation are incredibly strong. We just need to watch for a sweep at this point that could be seemingly damaging from a BTC standpoint, but the focus of altcoins is normally what marks the end of the cycle. To proceed with this idea, I made it very clear that the one thing I do think has very likely topped is XRP, and I equally got attacked for that idea. No matter what you do in crypto, unfortunately, due to this very immature, childish market, which quite frankly just makes me absolutely despise and hate crypto. It's not an enjoyable experience being in crypto because of the people that pollute the market. But the idea here was similar, that XRP is probably topped. And in fact, we covered in our video that 3.6 was probably an overall top for the market. And now that we've got this breakdown, well, we need to wait 15 days for monthly closure first, because if we reclaim this level, it's just another wick like we saw before. And from that liquidation event, we've only really come back in to fill the wicks legitimately now, depending on the chart you're viewing, of course. The liquidation event really threw a spanner in the works. But otherwise, we could be seeing a mirror of history here. And like I showed, XRP has done a good 1000% plus this cycle. Ethereum has not. Ethereum this cycle has done like 400%, 460%. For Ethereum to mirror the returns of XRP, it needs to go to logically $10,000. Now, I would say that's very possible, because for the total market cap to complete this sequence, we would likely need to go to 5-6 trillion, and that would be a major contributing factor of Ethereum. Now, of course, what led to this situation? Even though the cycle was theoretically over from here and we saw a modest drop, the market drove up higher one more time. That was for everything to begin exploding. And even where coins like sand, in that window in time, corrected and then rocketed. This is where the alt season generally happens, and it takes a very large correction of this magnitude to achieve such a thing. And that is exactly why I've said I wanted to see a reversal from 125k, a crash down to around 80k, and of course that was my threshold originally. But now that we've broken lower, the concept is the same. This is BTC profit taking underway. So when a lot of people have the usual FUDs and narratives of, oh, the market's never going to recover, what's it going to take for altcoins to go higher, blah, 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 it's never going to go up again, I disagree. I completely disagree. And whilst the magnitude of this move has been a bit bigger than I really wanted, I see no reason to view it any differently because of where these altcoins in the market as a whole is. Now, my thoughts for XRP remain the same here. And I think, of course, eventually we are going to go to 50 cents and lower. And my plan is to buy this again anywhere from 50 cents down to even that low of 10 cents, which, of course, when I said that up here, and when I said $1 from up there, no one wanted to listen. Everyone was laughing at me. You can't win in this game. You do one thing wrong, people will just jump onto that. But I think there's a shot here that even if the cycle has ended, BTC can drive back up to its highs, possibly even take out the high. This could be where an alt season happens. Between driving up to here and taking out the high, this could be where Ethereum, considering where it's trading, begins its journey to 6k, which is the first notable all-time high target, to all the way up to here. This could also be where the total market cap begins its journey. But what XRP could merely do is drive back up to the highs like it did before, maybe take it out to $4, and all of the coins catch up. Because if BTC is there, Ethereum is there, the total market cap is there, for BTC to revisit the low of its cycle bottom, most of these would be at these depths. Now, of course, that's very possible and could easily happen. At this point, of course it could, but I don't think it will go all the way down there right now. And historically speaking, the cycle did not end here until the market caught up with BTC to then drop down collectively from those highs. That's why here it didn't make sense. But once we got the catch up, it then all fell together. And we have not seen that yet, and could very well be the case even for coins like Link. Because of course, as these now start to trade in these overall low points, even coins like this and coins like this is where historically the magic begins to happen. Now, the only other circumstance could be this is a COVID 2020 style situation entirely, where we go back to where XRP was after its first cycle was over. And whilst these are all in multi-year bear markets right now, this is still in an overall bullish market. Therefore, if there is to be another drop down to the downside at this point, and the market is to take out the low, let's say on BTC, around that 55k region down to around 50k, that will deliver the final devastating blow. Now, if we're going to get to that low, there's two ways this can happen, I would say. The one thing that does concern me at this point is there's no real fundamental news. I'm sure you can all agree. What's quite crazy about this is there's been no legitimate FUD. People are saying all kinds of things, right? Binance is selling, or CZ is dumping the market. The reason there's so many sells coming through on Binance, etc., is because Binance is one of the biggest exchanges. Of course, there's going to be more sell volume on Binance. Of course there is. It's the most liquid exchange out there. It's not Coinbase dumping. It's no different to people being like BlackRock are buying the dip. They're not. Their customers are buying the dip. So in terms of legitimate FUD, minus the fact that obviously Jeffrey Epstein could be Satoshi, it's not really any warranted FUD. So it raises the question of, do we need a classic black swan or just a negative fundamental event to mark a bottom of some sorts? But I think there is absolutely zero necessity to be fearful at this moment in time. Unless, of course, for some reason you've decided to buy any of these coins near their highs, which I haven't done. That's not what I've been buying, because I believe the money is not situated in the coins that have made their movements. Now, of course, there is still plausibly some money in Ethereum, but it's still not as much as the others. The strongest play is always going to be F from an altcoin basis. And this is historically what happens. And I think F suppression is the biggest indicator for us that things are not over yet. When this is trading down there, but the total market cap is up there, how could we plausibly be bearish in any way, shape, or form when the best is likely yet to come? And I think that goes in two ways. If there is going to be a bear market, we would likely see a recovery first. And then alt season happens from here to there. And then the bear market comes into play. Historically, at a moment in time, which I'll show you here right now, and we'll get to all of these in a moment. But one thing I also covered was the realized losses. And this is one of my favorite on-chain metrics, because the moment you get that first initial surge, and we saw record realized losses on-chain of $5.7 billion, the moment you get that large irregular surge, you begin to understand the pain point of the market. And I did make it clear it doesn't mean it's a pinpoint bottom. In some circumstances, it can be pretty much a pinpoint bottom indication. In other circumstances, the market will need to break lower. But what you need to understand is similar to FTX, a bottom was still formulated in June 2022 of $20,000. The market then broke another 5K lower, essentially, to deliver the final blow, where a secondary major surge came through. COVID was a perfect strike. Over here, before we got the rally to the upside, we got a very similar predicament. A massive irregular surge, we broke down lower, more volatile spikes of realized losses. But if I was to illustrate this with a classic snip tool, once again, and just highlight it here, I think I did this in the previous video as well, but if I'm to enlarge this and just give it a quick annotation, you can kind of catch my gist here of what this essentially tells you. Historically, surges in realized losses have marked bottom territories. and where the formulation of a bottom begins to take place. This is where people historically are capitulating at a very high level. That would be the most foolish time from here onwards, from the moment you see that spike, to be becoming bearish. You should be becoming more bullish with each decline, because these are the people that capitulate and buy back in higher. So if we were to illustrate that to understand, maybe with a zone, let's get a little zone up. You can see the corresponding areas of where the biggest surges continuously occur within the market. And it may not be an immediate effect, but you can see historically it is always when those major surges come through during a peak decline within the market. Even over here for the short term, it would have been a plausible mirror in that area. But more importantly, when you get regular surges like this, and they come through continuously, you know a pain point is being reached significantly if you pair that with where these surges are occurring, specifically here as well, and specifically here. So to see the market reach the pain threshold of this magnitude and record realized losses being nowhere near the previous cycle low, this should already be a very telltale sign for us of what's taking place in this vicinity and why confidence must be absolutely maintained here, especially if you're holding altcoins. And I would argue you should be looking at altcoins more than ever. So if you then pair what you're seeing here with what I've been buying and holding, the drop is not that big at all. And a singular wick up or a weekly candle quickly turns what is currently a drawdown into a very rapid profit. And in fact, prior to the 250k drawdown at the moment that I'm in on that portfolio, I was up 250k. It's only taken several weeks to see that decline. And as we know, the largest movements often spawn from these sort of periods. Now, looking further, MVRV extreme deviation bands, this last flagged up exactly in 2022. When you break below the green extreme downside deviation, you are basically in your vicinity of some magical shit on the cusp of taking place. Yet this last took place at a $20,000 to $15,000 Bitcoin. This last took place COVID during a 4 to 3k Bitcoin. This last took place in 2019 at a 3k Bitcoin. And obviously over here in 2014. We have seen extreme deviations at merely a midpoint of this cycle, which leads me to believe we are nowhere near the end of this cycle. And there's two ways to view this. This is either a super speed run of a bear market, the quickest we've ever seen, that is going to start to turn around from here and continue a new cycle, which will be where everything flies up together, or this is an extreme correction to maintain the overall structure to do exactly what it did before and reject the previous all-time high to continue the trend much further. There is no other way to view this, in my opinion. And unless, of course, the market is about to die completely and it's the end of everything we know, I don't know why we would be scared of what we see here. And more so, when people say wrecked, how could I be wrecked if I'm merely holding assets at their very lows? It would be like holding this here and people saying you're wrecked, you're wrecked, you're wrecked, and then boom. And that's what people were doing here. When I bought XRP in COVID, I went public with it, documented it all. And it was the same thing. You're an idiot. You're going to get everyone killed. You're going to get everyone slaughtered. You're an idiot, blah, blah, blah. The truth is, the comments you get, the people that do those things, and the people that are quick to comment and hate, and unfortunately with what I do, I get hate irrespective. I got severe hate here. Lord behold, the market crashed. Said we'll probably bottom there. You get hate because you say the market's going to pull back there. Time and time again, people hate. But the truth is, the people that leave those comments are not just immature, but they're not successful people. They are not making money from the markets, because no successful person making money from the markets behaves in that manner. And that's the reality of trading and the reality of crypto. It's full of kids hyper gambling, trying to get rich quickly and have no control of their emotions. And the purpose of my videos is to help you gain control of those emotions. You can't control everyone and you cannot help everyone. People will fail to see things in a certain way. And my goal is not to ever convince anyone to see anything in a certain way. It's to show you my thoughts of the market and what I believe is going to happen. And I believe time will prove me correct, as it often does. And I am more correct than I am wrong. But when I am wrong, it is heavily attacked because it helps those inferior feel a bit better about themselves. But I believe if I am to start posting the profits that will come from taking the risks in this area, things will change quite quickly. And I'm very optimistic for that. And I think you should all be optimistic yourselves as well. Now, even if you've bought coins like, let's say, Link here, and it's gone down to there, the truth is most people are willing to buy every step of the way higher because they deem that to be the highest price. But you must remember the best time to buy is during these predicaments. If you buy Link now at $8 and it goes down to $4, you should be looking to accumulate more. You should not be scared of that unless, of course, Link is to cease to exist as well, which I highly doubt at this moment it would. I mean, crypto is unpredictable. But the concept is drawdown is good in specific areas. Drawdown is good at the correct time and place. It is not something to be feared unless you've been a fucking idiot and bought at all-time highs, which I will never do. And if I do, please, by all means, attack me for doing such a thing. But there is a time and place to hold drawdown, and there is a time and place to not hold drawdown. And I believe right now for altcoins, which no doubt, unless you have precisely waited for these very moments to buy, you're going to be in drawdown. This will scare you from accumulation. This will scare you from seeing the opportunities that can very easily spawn and begin to unfold from areas like this, which historically they always have. They always have. So the idea is that the rotations could be very close to unfolding here. And of course, it takes a big sell-off of that nature to happen. Now, again, the biggest complexity and annoyance was that the liquidation event brought in my targets on many exchanges. That's what's really annoying about everything that's happened here, because we've just had to come in and fill those wicks properly to bring them in legitimately, let's say. But considering what I wanted to see in terms of where the altcoins would go, they done that from the liquidation event. But now that BTC's declined, because that's taken BTC going lower to get them there officially, it doesn't change my mind. It doesn't change my thought process. But what it now allows me to see is exactly what's happened historically in previous cycles. It just had to be a liquidation event followed by another one to break down and make this a reality. And what I mean by that is every single alt season we've seen, and this pieces with my original idea of a drop from all-time high, is that you will see a drop so scary it will make people believe we're in a bear market. Well, we've obviously done that right now because everyone's believing we're in a bear market. But this happened before here. And this was a necessity, even here during COVID, to bring these coins down to the depths of despair where you are never going to believe in a recovery again. And it's at that very moment that the tide soon begins to turn. Now, is this going to happen overnight? At this moment in time, we don't know. But of course, after 5 consecutive months of painful drops straight down, the market is inevitably going to recover. The only thing I'm very cautious of at this point in time is if we do not go lower from here and come into that 55, 50K range, you do still want to leave that open. Now, how that may come through, if we do not get an immediate drop the following month or at some point this month to recover, is looking back to 90K to the highs over here. Because what could happen is we could see a COVID-style situation occurring. Because there's been no negative fundamental event, of course, I naturally now need to look at this and be like, well, hold on a minute, Buster. Where's the classic bottom marking FUD? And what this now means is prior to what could be a very significant reversal, specifically from the basis of altcoins, and my targets remain for those coins, is we need to watch for a recovery first. Of course, later down the line, if we get that and we recover to this region, this is where we want to consider that something negative could potentially prosper and bring in a final bottom. Not down to there, but you catch the gist. This could be where we come in and sweep the low one more time, COVID style. It's essentially a perfect blend of both cycles paired in with one. But of course, looking at the overall channel here, you've got this here, and you've got this here, and we'll enlarge this very quickly. So of course, you don't want to be quick to rule out the cycle, but more so classify this in the present moment until you get a monthly closure, especially of what could very well be the market coming back into the depths of this void to continue this cycle to much new heights. And I do believe that at present will be the case. Of course, I've got bear market scenarios to consider, such as driving up to here, popping through the high, alt season happens in this area, and then the market collectively falls down. Simultaneously, if it is to actually at this point be a bear market and we drive into there, well, where do you think we're going next? This is the beauty of an overall channel we're within. If the market does not achieve this within this cycle, then because of how quickly we've dropped, the cycle would literally, or the bear market, aka, would end right there. And that would be your next target irrespective. But if you're buying altcoins, they're already in the same regions anyway. They would just go a little bit lower. You should not be fearful in any way, shape, or form. Now, to continue with this, one of the most important of all metrics here is what is historically the cleanest of all metrics that often becomes the easiest thing to gauge where we are. Now, historically, when the percent of supply and profit enters the voids of 50 to 40%, it has aligned with every single cycle bottom in history. Now, this is important. Cycle bottom. We are seeing a cycle bottom indicator flag up at $60,000. What the hellionte is going on here? If that's not a telling sign of why what is plausibly a $10,000 so or decline additional to where we are seeing history repeat itself once again at a significantly higher standpoint. I think this is very, very important to gauge. Of course, again, I wish I kind of took this all into consideration a bit earlier with how far we could have gone for that drop because it would have been easier to gauge. But we hit a point where 50% of the BTC supply has gone into profit, which once hit the peak, and this was a contributing factor to how I found the top, is a contributing factor. We had 99% of the supply in profit naturally at 125K. 50% of the supply is now in profit. Of course, you look at that, it speaks for itself. Bitcoin cycle extremes. Now, these are cycle extreme oscillators that, again, we're not going to break down right now, but it's very simple. Once you see the blue begin to flag up, the conditions are met for historically every single significant bottom. We are now seeing this triggered again at a $60,000 Bitcoin. Now, of course, as this BTC begins to get sold and you see these realized losses on chain, you need to look at this and go, well, if this is what everyone is doing and the majority are always wrong and never sell the top and always capitulate at the bottom, what could this be telling us about where we are situated within the market right now? And why, at the very least, your eyes still need to be oriented towards a recovery. Because in these moments in time, historically, as a bottom begins to form, with or without said black swan, it's not when everyone's telling you to buy. What was everyone doing at 125K when I said, I think we're going to crash? What were they doing to me? What were they saying to me? And what were they saying to you? You did not see a single influencer, a single person really warn of any downside. It was the opposite. It was higher, 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 higher. And at every low, it's going to be people saying lower, 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 lower. This is why I said, even if we break, people will not buy. They will not buy. And truthfully, I don't know if Bitcoin is a worthwhile buy at 60K. In the actual bear market, when we really see some depths on Bitcoin, I do want to buy Bitcoin. And my plan is to actually make as much money from altcoins as possible to wait for the next bear market to then get into certain coins like BTC for a longer term hold. But of course, at a $60,000 point, it's still not a very favorable price from a risk to reward basis, in my opinion. I don't like that. But I like if something's at all-time lows, that's more plausible to me. Now, another thing to look at here, of course, fear and greed index is going to be an extreme fear. That's a given. BTC is in hope and fear. Now, the net unrealized profit and loss is one of my favorite metrics as well. Now, BTC is not yet in capitulation. But why I am very confident in altcoins is because Ethereum has entered capitulation. Solana has been in the depths of capitulation for a while. XRP is in the depths of capitulation. Short-term holders, who make up the majority of those realized losses, of course, buying from 90K to 125, are deep in the territory of capitulation. Long-term holders are not quite there yet, and we actually probably do need to see a bit of a drop. But BTC is an interesting one, and this is a very good metric to use in line with where we could be overall. And what this essentially gauges is the realized, unrealized losses, and how it gauges this is by subtracting the realized cap from the market cap and dividing the result by the market cap. Now, if you look here, what this basically means, if you look over here, this is a percentage scale. And at the moment, this is around, or was at its lowest area, around 12%, 0.1119. Currently around 18%. Now, what this basically means is from this line, this is where the realized cap of Bitcoin is. Historically, Bitcoin breaks below the realized cap in every cycle to mark a bottom. Now, the realized cap at this current moment in time is around $55,000. So, of course, it doesn't need to happen, but at this moment in time, because of where we are, I would say it most definitely needs to be considered, because even if we float away from here and revisit the 90K threshold, a black swan that occurs could be the devastating blow that brings this into fruition. And that's really where I would be looking, beneath that 55K level, as a massive capitulation entry point, because capitulation begins historically below the realized price. So at this moment in time, with the realized price being approximately 55K, which I'll show you in a sec, that would be what brings BTC into capitulation. But because those altcoins are currently already in capitulation, it may not need to go there just yet. In fact, in 2021, we didn't even enter hope and fear. We entered optimism and anxiety. The market bottomed after a 50% decline. We then saw the recovery where alt season took place here. And then the market trickled down into capitulation after. So with where we currently are on the total market cap, in what could very well be, upon a monthly confirmation, a recovery above this TL, we have just seen a secondary retest of this level in an overall upwards trend, with the major counter trend being fulfilled from here, exactly what we saw over here during COVID. So of course, there's room to understand where the depths can go, but naturally, is that anything to be scared about at this point? The only people that should really be scared are those that bought Bitcoin at all-time highs, which you would have been a bit of a plonker to do. But if you're holding altcoins, you should not necessarily be fearful in any way, shape or form, because this is a very telling sign for us. And knowing that alts have entered the depths of those levels already, I would say it's the opposite of where you should be scared. And historically, you should be scared in belief, denial, euphoria, greed, which is here, where everyone experienced belief, denial, euphoria, greed. But when everyone experiences hope and fear and capitulation, you don't want to be scared in any way, shape or form, because it tells you the bottom is in reach. If not already there, it's a stone's throw away from a singular sweep. Now, if we go to the realized price and zoom in, we don't need to look at the whole of history, but we can generally see from history, it tells us something quite important. The realized price being breached is what brings capitulation. It's the realized cap divided by the current supply. Essentially, the average acquisition price of most coins. 2020 we broke, 2018 we broke, and FTX we broke as well. Of course, we are floating just above this level of $55,000 at this point. So the market either ultimately significantly trolls and deviates away and continues upwards, and there's various reasons that could happen if total closes the monthly strong. But of course, knowing we are now so close to this threshold and what could plausibly be a depletion below this level, I think this is a great thing to now view with an understanding of where we are. And that's why I'm showing you this. It's because if you look at where this currently is and you understand the implications of what happens upon an additional decline at this point, this is where your bias must be strength. This can now allow you to gauge a specific criteria and a specific area and frontier and threshold of what happens if we go lower. And you can already see the effects of where we are on the market participants as a whole. So now, if you get that down and we get that move down, if it is to happen, and again, I'm not taking the risk of waiting for it. As you can see, I'm continuously buying. But should that happen, which is completely fucking plausible, most definitely at this point, do you want to join the herd in being scared, panicking, selling, giving up? Or do you want to do the opposite of the herd, as they historically do in these moments? And what we should also mention here is not only is this happening, these extreme cycle deviations at a $60,000 Bitcoin, but it is happening in pretty much the sixth consecutive month of bearish decline. It is also happening at the start of the year. We are in February right now. We are in February. The year ended and started aggressively bearish. If you understand that, you then begin to understand what can happen by the end of the year, possibly. You can also understand is if things proceed as drastic, it can change just as quickly. The market does not go up forever. The market also doesn't go down forever. The market does not continue evolving every cycle, every step of the way. But I think it's too soon to make the assumption that the cycle is different. And of course, with more detail, more explanation, and showing you a bit more to help visualize the process, this hopefully puts things into perspective. And my goal is to not necessarily give you a clean blueprint, but it's more so to actually help you stay calm in these situations. And that's kind of always been my job, is to be a therapist more than anything and a psychologist, to help people stay calm and understand the bigger picture in the situation, and also understand how in times like this, of course, you're going to get people panicking, you're going to get people scaring you, you're going to go online and everything you see is bearish. But I don't think that's ever a necessity to be bearish or ever a necessity to view the market in a different light, because it's in those very moments that the craziest of things begin to happen as everyone begins to flee the market. And it will be the same people that told you to buy the top and say they're selling more here, that if we recover and go back to the highs or even proceed, they'll be like, did you buy the dip anon? Bought the dip here. No one tells you that until after. And this is where the exit liquidity will revisit back into the market. And as all of these individuals begin to exit, allowing a bit of leeway down below, the zones are on the chart, explainable in themselves. I believe, especially if we can get a sufficient monthly closure, that things are going to change very, very soon. Things are going to change very quickly. Of course, I have to put my hands up and say I wasn't perfect on this one, but unfortunately, the liquidation event gave me exactly what I wanted, and I had to make a choice of buy, hold a bit of drawdown, or sit on the side and potentially miss the entire move if it was to be the real bottom. It threw a spanner in the works, but in terms of my viewpoint, this is why my fixation remains the same on where we are. It's been a slightly bigger decline, but I wouldn't necessarily say the viewpoint changes. And I would say, if anything, looking back at history, this is where your confidence should be maintained in the market, if not a stronger conviction should be growing. And that includes with an additional decline. Do not look at it in the eyes of how much worse could this get, but look at this more with the perspective of how much better can this get. I said this to the innovators recently, but the likelihood is most of you, if not all of you, have some form of income, have some form of job, multiple jobs, or run a business. When you look back historically, and you buy these coins at higher prices, let's just say like someone bought Zcash here, or didn't buy Zcash here, or didn't buy Zcash here, or didn't buy Link here. And they look back and go, I wish I bought at these prices. Well, guess what? For most coins, the market is back in these prices right now. And it's been there for a while. It tapped in once and it's come back again. And could even chop about in these areas for a while and then take out those lows one more time. So when you look at these moments, you don't want to be focused on the present, you want to be focused on the future, because that's exactly how you capture these lows of these coins before the departure happens. If you want to legitimately make what they call so-called life-changing money, which it is when the cycles turn and when the altcoins begin to move, it's done so by strategically positioning with every decline in these regions. And for that matter, and for everything I've just shown, my conviction remains stronger than ever.